Thank you for having me. So, regarding the latest on the tariff issue, the situation is Sri Lanka was given a tariff rate of 44% by the Trump administration, but now it has been reduced to 30%. The most important thing is how do we compare with other countries in the region? Though we have got a better deal than countries such as Bangladesh, when we compare to other competitors such as Vietnam, Vietnam has got tariff rate of only 20%. So from 46% to 26%, where Vietnam agreed to allow most American goods for almost zero duties. Other thing is also India is expected to get a much better deal than Sri Lanka. So that is also something of a worry for Sri Lanka. But what would be the effect? The effect would be a major hit on especially the apparel sector, where a large amount of apparels go to the US. So currently we have a very large trade surplus with the US, almost close to 3 billion US dollars. And while we only import around 300 to 400 million dollars worth of American goods. But at the same time, this would any drastic tariff rates that would be finalized on the 1st of August would have an effect on Sri Lanka's current account as well. Because as you know, we have to have reserves of $7 billion by the end of this year, $9 billion by the end of next year, and at the end of 2027, we need reserves of up to 13 billion US dollars because debt payments are due by 2028. So this will definitely have an effect, and we also need to get our credit ratings up. So this is going to have an effect on that front as well for Sri Lanka. So it's extremely crucial that we get a good deal by the 1st of August, especially to save the apparel sector, which indirectly contributes to around 1 million jobs, of which a large amount depends on exports to the US. But the other effects are due to this trade war, there could be a global economic slowdown as well. That means that if the effects go on to the EU market, we could see reduction in demand on that front as well. At the same time, if the global economy slows down, the price of oil can come down as well. As you know, a very large portion of our imports are for energy imports. So that can also come down. So the effect on the current account may not be as large as what is seen from the reduction of our exports to the West. I would say we need to avoid two things at the moment. One is the proposed digital tax of 18% because the companies most affected would be American companies, the tech giants like Microsoft, AWS, Facebook. So since most of these companies are quite close to the Trump administration, we don't want any unnecessary retaliation from the US because President Trump has clearly stated that any country that puts additional taxes on American goods would see a retaliation from the US. And the other thing is also he has mentioned about any country closely aligning with the BRICS bloc. So we have to be a little bit careful on that front as well. But what can be done? So the immediate solution would be, for example, we need to go on the eliminating para tariffs, especially for US goods. Because reducing or eliminating para tariffs is anyway part of the IMF program, which we have to do in the next 2 years. So we might as well do it in the next 2 weeks to get some sort of a reduction to save our apparel and other sectors. That would be definitely one thing. The other thing is we also need to reduce custom duties on American goods in order to somehow get a reduction on the rates they have proposed for us. Because at the end of the day, we only import around close to 300 to 400 million dollars worth of American goods. So even if we make it duty free, there's hardly there isn't going to be a very drastic increase in imports from American goods because we don't really buy products that we actually need as part of our core needs. So we need to actually look at it in the short term, try to save our industry. Long term solution would definitely be diversifying markets. So in order to do that, we need to look at other markets, and that means the solution would definitely be in the long term trade liberalization and trade facilitation. One point we cannot tap into, we cannot immediately move which markets because the American market is very huge. If you add the EU as well, there is no market in the world that can replace the US market. I mean, we can't overnight switch to China or Africa or India because most of these countries would not need our products or they can manufacture it in their own countries as well. So what we need is a strategy for the long term. That is, especially as I've said many times, 70% of global trade is supplying global value chain. And Sri Lanka has missed out on this because we are very poor on trade liberalization and trade facilitation. Trade liberalization meaning we only have 4 free trade agreements, and we are considered one of the most protected economies in the world. And trade facilitation meaning the ease of importing and exporting, we rank in certain things worse than sub-Saharan African countries. So, in order to, if we improve on these two fronts, we can get export driven oriented FDI, which is absolutely essential to tap into global value chains, where we can, instead of focusing on finished goods, we can focus on supplying key inputs for global value chains, like for example, providing a certain input in the value chain of Samsung. So, see, this is how Vietnam and even China went up. So, we need a shift in Sri Lanka's export strategy. We also need to look more at product diversification. You know, we are not going to see an increase of exports, especially if we focus on apparel, tea, coconut, rubber. So, if you look at the exports from all 4 of the sectors I mentioned, of course, apparel, the net exports is only $2 billion, because though apparel comes as $5 billion, in order to get 5 billion, we import around $3 billion. So, the net is 2 billion. So, if you take the net exports of apparel, rubber, tea, coconut, it only amounts to around $5 billion. So, that is almost the exact amount we use to import energy. So, we need to definitely diversify, and in order to do that, we need foreign direct investment, because if you look at Vietnam, about 2/3 of Vietnam's exports come from companies which have some sort of FDI. So, in order to get FDI, Sri Lanka really needs to move hard on structural reforms. By structural reforms, I mean SOE reforms, land reforms, labor reforms, regulatory reform, and of course, trade reforms, in order to make ourselves competitive. And not just tariffs, but we also need to reduce our costs of running business. So, we have one of the highest electricity costs in Asia, South Asia. We have very high construction costs. Food prices are one of the highest. So, generally, we need to make policies in order to reduce this, in order for Sri Lanka to become competitive in the long term. So, in the short term, we need to negotiate something with the US to reduce this, to at least make our apparel sector survive the coming few years. But in the long term, we definitely need to diversify, not only region wise, but also product wise. Thank you very much.